Students, the title of this lecture is The Fruitful Valley. Last time, as you know, we talked about Crusoe's attempts to build his shelter. And we said that Crusoe has succeeded to build a shelter into which he has, of course, conveyed all his or carried all his provisions. As you know, living alone in this remote island does not satisfy Robinson Crusoe, who looks sad and depressed. Crusoe names the island an island of despair, which shows that he has no hope of being rescued. But this does not prevent him from keeping himself secure and away from the danger of wild beasts. He embarks on building his shelter, into which, as we said, he carries all his provisions. Building his habitation or shelter makes him feel secure, but this security, or let us say discomfort, is disturbed by his illness. The severe illness of Robinson Crusoe leads him to stay in bed for several days. He suffers alone a deep pain that increases his distress, caused mainly by being cast away in this remote island. Let us now continue reading the novel to see what he is going to do. Page 68, please. In this interval, the good advice of my father came to my mind, and presently his prediction, which I mentioned at the beginning of this story, was that if I did take this foolish step, God would not bless me, and I would have leisure hereafter to reflect upon having neglected his counsel, when there might be none to assist in my recovery. Now, said I, aloud, my dear father's words are come to pass. God's justice has overtaken me, and I have none to help or hear me. Then I cried out, Lord, be my help, for I am in great distress. This was the first prayer, if I may call it, so that I'd made for many years. Crusoe here suffers severe flu, cold, and fever. His illness makes him come back to God and call for his help and support. Crusoe confesses that this is the first time for him to pray to God. His illness makes him be aware of his mistake. He realizes that his father's words come true. The tragic end of him is a punishment. He has been punished by God for his sins, and one of them is, of course, neglecting the advice of his father. Now he is alone without the help of anyone save God. Therefore, he calls God's help and starts reading the Bible regularly. Let us now move to another narrative paragraph. Page 72, please. From the 4th of July to the 14th, I was chiefly employed in walking about with my gun in my hand, a little and a little at a time, as a man that was gathering up his strength after a fit of sickness. For it is hardly to be imagined how low I was and to what weakness I was reduced. Being recovered from his illness, Robinson Crusoe goes out of his habitation, of course, for hunting. He is still vulnerable and tired, but he cannot stay in bed for a long time because he depends mainly on hunting in getting his food. Now let us read the narrative paragraph narrated by Crusoe in page 73, please. I had now been in this unhappy island above 10 months. All possibilities of deliverance from this condition seemed to be entirely taken from me, and I firmly believe that no human shape had ever set foot upon that place. Having now secured my habitation, as I thought, fully to my mind, I had a great desire to make a more perfect discovery of the island and to see what other productions I might find, which I yet knew nothing of. Being alone in this desolate island for more than 10 months, Crusoe's hope of being saved seems to be taken from him. He has entirely lost his hope of being delivered from his miserable condition. Living alone on this island, Crusoe realizes that no human being had ever set foot upon this island. Crusoe shows his great desire to make a perfect discovery of the island. So he decides, of course, to go to the other side of the island. Let us go now to page 74, please. The next day, the 16th, I went up the same way again, and after going something further than I had gone the day before, I found the broken the savannas cease, and the country become more woody than before. In this part I found different fruits, and particularly I found melons upon the ground in great abundance, and grapes upon the trees. The vines have spread indeed over the trees, and the clusters of grapes were just now in their prime, very ripe and rich. This was a surprising discovery, and I was exceedingly glad of it. In one of his in one of his attempts to discover the island, Robinson Crusoe finds a fruitful place. This fruitful land or place contains different fruitful trees such as melons, lemons, oranges, and grapes. For Crusoe, this is a surprising discovery that pleases him too much. Students, Crusoe continues, of course, his narration, telling his reader, at the end of this march, I came to an opening, he means opening area here, where the country seemed to descend to the west, and a little spring of fresh water, which issued out of the side of the hill by me, ran the other way, that is, due east, and the country appeared so fresh, so green, so flourishing, everything being in constant verdure or flourish of spring, that is looked like a planted garden. Crusoe here says that, of course, he continues walking in this green land. He finds more fruitful trees and a spring of fresh water. In the eyes of Crusoe, the place seems to be very beautiful and wonderful. It seems to be a planted garden in which things seem to be fresh and green. I descended a little on the side of that delicious vale, surveying it with a secret kind of pleasure, now mixed with my other afflicting thoughts, to think that this was all my own, that I was king and lord of all this country, indefensibly, and had a right of possession, and if I could convey it, I might have it in inheritance as completely as any lord of a manor in England. Here, Crusoe seems to be enchanted by the beauty of the green valley. He declares that he is the owner of this place and no one can share him the possession of this island. Students, at the end of this lecture, we are going to go back to this narrated paragraph to discuss it, of course, together or to analyze it more clearly. I saw here abundance of cocoa trees, orange and lemon and citron trees, but all wild and very few bearing any fruit, at least not then. However, the green leaves that I gathered were not only pleasant to eat, but very wholesome, and I mixed their juice afterwards with water, which made it very wholesome and very cool and refreshing. Here, Crusoe, of course, continues describing what he has discovered here in this green valley. He has seen more, of course, fruitful trees that make him be very happy. I found now I had business enough to gather and carry home, and I resolved to lay up a store as well of grapes as limes and lemons to furnish myself for the wet season which I knew was approaching. Crusoe here has found that he has a lot of things to do. He should gather these fruits and carry them to his habitation. He decides to store them or keep them to be used in the wet season, which is approaching. By the wet season, he means the rainy season. And the wet season starts from the half of August, of course, till the end of October. Now, what does the Fruitful Valley show? How does Crusoe respond to this surprising discovery? How do you see Robinson Crusoe here? Or how does Daniel Defoe present Crusoe here? Students, let us discuss all these questions. The surprising discovery, or the Fruitful Valley, makes Crusoe very happy. It makes him forget his pain and distress caused by being alone in this remote island. Crusoe has been possessed by his pleasure to discover the place that makes him feel that he is the king of this island. He's the owner of this island and he has to defend his right of possession. His words here show his individuality. I mean, the words in which he says that, just a minute, in which he says that I was king and lord of this country indefensibly. Okay. Crusoe is the only one who has the right to possess this island or even to inherit it. He is the lord of his kingdom. Crusoe's words here show that he has colonized or occupied the island. Daniel Defoe here portrays Crusoe as an English colonizer. As you know, Crusoe has left his motherland or home to be a great sailor and a merchant. So he has left his home to make a fortune, which is one of the aims of the English colonizer. Crusoe does not stop making adventures and riding the sea. Even though he owns a plantation in Brazil, he, as we have seen, of course, he does not refuse the offer of the merchants, and he embarks on his last voyage to bring Negroes. This shows that his desire The search for fortune does not come to an end. Crusoe wants to expand his business and fortune like that of the English colonizer. On his way to Africa, as you know, to bring slaves or Negroes, Crusoe is shipwrecked and he becomes the only survivor on a remote island. Even here on this island, Crusoe starts building his kingdom or empire. He has declared himself the king or the lord of this island. So he has colonized the island. Daniel Defoe portrays him here as a prototype of the English colonizer. So it is not the beauty of the island that has possessed him here. Crusoe has been possessed by the idea of being the owner of this place or this island. So Daniel Defoe here does not portray Crusoe as a poor man isolated in this desolate island, but rather a man who has occupied the island. Students, thank you for your listening. Now you can ask whatever you want related to the lecture.